I never figured that major truths would crash into life with headline noise or a door slamming. For me, it started with something small and easy to miss. A tiny ring of foil on the bath mat, flashing when a strip of morning light slipped across the tiles because I hadn't hit the switch as I walked in. I paused, half expecting a shard of something underfoot, then squatted and pinched up a little round disc, already trying to remember where I'd seen the same kind of backing, while wondering why it would be sitting on our floor at all. Up close, it was familiar, the thin aluminum from a push-through pill card, and one side was plain, while the other had a small 2 stamped on it, which made me stop because it was Wednesday, which meant that cover should have sealed Tuesday's tablet. I wasn't on any daily medication at 35, healthy, and not taking anything beyond an occasional aspirin. And as far as I knew, my wife, Alina, didn't need anything every day either. At our last checkups, we'd both been told we were in fine shape. So why would a Tuesday-marked foil circle be lying on our bathroom floor, I asked myself, trying to wave it off as some random bit of packaging we'd dropped without thinking, even as a tightness took hold just under my ribs. The only everyday pills we'd ever kept around were Alina's birth control, and that had been years before. Back when she shouldered prevention until we decided to be done growing, and I went in for a vasectomy. After that, she said she'd quit the pill entirely. But now I was holding Tuesday's empty bubble from a daily pack, and a chill crept up my back. Because if she was back on the pill, there was only one reason to worry about pregnancy. And in our home, that worry shouldn't exist unless something had changed, or someone else was in the picture. Once, I might have marched out and demanded an answer. This time, a different instinct took over, the one sharpened by long nights checking tolerances on designs at my engineering firm, and I decided I needed clean proof before I turned suspicion into a wrecking ball. I set the foil exactly where I'd found it, straightened up the room to the same look it had before, and headed to the office with my head lit up by questions I couldn't yet answer. At my desk, I opened new contract files and stared through them, then pulled up tabs for home DNA kits and quiet surveillance gear, because my thinking had gone dark in an hour, and the only way back to clarity was facts. If Alina was stepping out, I wanted the who and the how long, and I wanted to know whether Leo and Mara, our 5-year-old son and 3-year-old daughter, were my children the way I'd always believed, or whether the ground I stood on was pretending to be solid. I placed orders that made my stomach turn: slim voice recorders, button-sized cameras for the main rooms and the bathroom, software to mirror a phone, and cheek swab DNA tests. I told myself I needed evidence no one could argue with before I did anything that could blow our family apart. Those shipping updates felt like they took forever, and while I waited, I watched Alina closely for anything off. She moved through the week like she always did. No last-minute nights out, no changed scent, no wardrobe shift, and our intimacy stayed on its quiet, practical cadence in the early hours before kids padded down the hall. If she was unfaithful, she was masking it inside the normal so well I couldn't find a seam. When Friday hit, the front desk pinged that my packages had arrived. I'd had them sent to work to dodge awkward questions at home. That afternoon, I claimed a light schedule and slipped back to the house early. Our au pair had the kids at the table, so I chatted about snacks and cartoons before heading upstairs to place the cameras in the bathroom, living room, and bedroom, the spots most likely to show me what was true. The bathroom mattered most, because that would reveal whether she really was swallowing a daily contraceptive again. After bedtime stories, I swabbed Leo and Mara's cheeks for the lab kits, making a game of it so they wouldn't worry. Then swabbed myself and sealed the envelopes that promised results within about 2 days of the lab's receipt. That evening, Alina came home on time, and we made small talk. Her day, the kids, maybe a show. While I sat there feeling like a visitor in my own life, when she stepped into the shower, I slid into the garage and fixed a recorder under her seat, then mirrored her phone in my office. To my surprise, the data was clean. No suggestive texts, no strange numbers, no calls that hinted at anything off. Either I was wrong, or she was more careful than I'd let myself imagine. The weekend felt almost normal. Chores, park time with the kids, and the kind of morning closeness that has more to do with routine than romance. I kept my voice steady and my eyes on tasks, but underneath I was restless. Come Monday, I told her I'd be working from home and waited for the door to close, then pulled the micro SD cards from the hidden cameras and loaded them one by one onto my laptop. In the bathroom clips, Alina took a small white pill around the same time each day proof she'd gone back on birth control, and my stomach sank, but I made myself keep reviewing. The bedroom camera brought the next jolt. On Saturday evening, while I'd been in the kitchen with a pan in my hand, she came from the shower, sat on the edge of the bed, and typed on a phone I didn't recognize. It wasn't the handset I had already cloned, which meant she had a second device I'd never seen. I watched her finish, cross to the return vent on the wall, loosen the cover with a coin, slide the phone into the space behind, and set the grate back in place with care. And I understood exactly why I hadn't found a trace on the official phone. I needed to know what lived on that hidden device. That night, after she fell asleep, I checked the vent from the other side in Mara's room and found nothing, which meant she'd moved it to her bag or some other hide. I waited for another shower, and when water ran again, I opened the vent from the kids' side. This time, the phone rested inside. I grabbed it, jogged to my office, cloned its contents to a fresh device in minutes, while my hands shook hard enough to tattle, then slipped it back and settled into Mara's room with the rocking chair creaking so I could look like a dad watching a sleeping child when Alina peeked in. At my office the next morning, I opened the cloned data and my eyes watered before I reached the third thread. The messages were explicit, full of hotels and detailed acts, and they made jokes about how I didn't catch on. They even worked around my travel like my calendar was a shared resource. His name never appeared, which made sense if it was someone close enough to be dangerous in writing, and that only sharpened my sense that this wasn't random. I cried at my desk, ignoring the intercom until Monica, my no-nonsense assistant, a few years older than me, let herself in, locked the door, and set a tissue box by my elbow. She asked what happened without a flinch, and I told her, from the bit of foil to the daily pills, the hidden cameras, and the secret phone in the vent. Feeling pathetic and exposed while she just listened. Then she said, calm as a plan, that we needed details and a strategy. And when I told her I had swabbed the kids as well, she nodded. First find out the truth, then decide what to do. She also said I needed to be out of the house for a few days so patterns would show. And before I could argue, she texted Alina from my phone about an emergency at our Portland branch and told me I wouldn't be back until Thursday. Alina replied with sympathy for the crisis, and Monica handed me a card with the name of her divorce attorney, Dana Krieger, who had gotten Monica through her own mess years ago. I was in Dana's office within hours, still in shock. She listened, asked tight questions, and laid out my roads. Ignore it, file amicably, or go in hard with an adultery petition that would gut Alina's claims. Doing nothing was impossible. Being gentle felt like rewarding a con. The third option was the only one that made sense, and I chose it even with my voice rough with anger. Dana agreed, said we'd collect more proof before we filed, and asked for the cloned phone to build a case. I handed it over without hesitation. Monica checked me into a modest hotel, told me to shower, order food, and stay away from the minibar because I needed clear eyes for the next moves, and I sat on a bed, feeling like my life had been leveled in a day. A sliver of hope was still there, the sliver that said the kids might be mine, or that I'd misread, but underneath I knew the odds. The lab pinged the next morning to say results would be ready by afternoon. I couldn't bring myself to open the page, so Monica took my phone, pulled up the portal, and said we'd check again later, because nothing had posted yet. In the meantime, she reminded me I had more than feelings to protect. Over 100 employees depended on stability at our engineering firm, and if Alina emptied me out, the company could take a hit it didn't survive. That snapped me back into the mindset I trusted: steps, structures, and shields, and we went to see my business attorney, Patrick Yates. He reminded me of the prenup every partner is required to sign to safeguard the firm from spousal claims. It kept the company off limits, meaning Alina could reach only my personal income and assets, like the house or retirement accounts. His advice was blunt. Buy out Victor, my partner who'd been hinting he wanted to sell, and convert as much liquid cash as possible into the company, even if it meant taking a loan. Because once funds sat behind that firewall, she couldn't pry them out. It sounded like a lot, but not as bad as watching her walk off with half of what I had built. I called Victor. He asked why, and I told him flat Alina had likely been unfaithful for years. He said he was sorry and agreed to sell most of his stake, keeping a small consulting slice. We wrote the outlines over lunch. Monica and I checked the DNA portal again. This time, results were up. She read first, her expression falling into sorrow. Then I took the phone with hands that wouldn't steady and saw what I didn't want to see. Both kids shared a biological father, and it wasn't me. The heat of rage was a flare. The grief was a weight. I felt like I might drop, and Monica cut through with a single order: stay focused or lose everything. She walked me back to Dana's office, where the attorney had her own update. The investigator had footage of a man entering my house the previous night, with a key that wasn't mine. Later, when I reviewed my living room camera, I watched him step in and heard Leo shout, "Daddy Paul," as he ran across the rug. That told me what I needed to know about the man's identity. Paul Barrett, Alina's longtime boss. I understood then that this might have been going on nearly the entire marriage. Dana took the clip and ran Paul's name. He was a senior executive at Alina's company, bound by a no fraternization rule in their handbook. She explained we could go after the employer for failing to enforce its own policy, and pursue Paul for alienation of affection, and press Alina for any false information tied to the children's paperwork. The list was long and aggressive, and she was fully aligned with the nuclear path I'd picked. I went back to the hotel numb. That evening, Monica appeared at the door and said I shouldn't be alone, to grab my bag, and to come stay in her spare room. I didn't have the energy to argue. She gave me privacy and calm, not romance, like someone who knew I was shattered and wasn't going to let me sink. The next move was getting Victor's buyout over the line. We pushed my money into the company, which made me look lean on paper, and I cashed out my 401k, despite the penalty, preparing to refinance the house if needed. Legal moves thanks to the prenup and timing before filing. Patrick drew up the documents. Victor signed. The majority stake shifted to me. The business sat beyond Alina's reach. Monday morning, Dana filed for divorce on adultery, fraud, and emotional distress, and simultaneously lodged a suit against Paul's employer for policy violations, with process servers ready. One set for Paul at work, one for HR, one for Alina at her desk. At exactly 10, the notice hit my inbox. The divorce papers were served. Minutes later, so were the other actions. 10 minutes after that, my phone lit with a call I thought would be Alina. Turned out it was my mother. She said she'd received my letter, as had my father, and asked in a hard voice if this was really what I was doing. I asked if she had read what I sent. She said she had and didn't believe it, that Alina was my wife and the kid's mother, and asked how I could just... "They aren't my children," I cut in. There was a pause. Then she said they were mine in every way that mattered. "No," I said, "they aren't." She said I'd raised them since the day they were born, and asked if that didn't count. "It was built on a lie," I answered. Her breathing sharpened. She said I was walking away like they were nothing, punishing kids for Alina's choices, and that they would suffer because I'd decided I didn't want fatherhood anymore. I snapped and shouted back that I wouldn't lose my sanity to keep up a lie, and when she said she wouldn't lose her grandkids, I told her that was her decision and ended the call. The next ring was Alina. She said we needed to talk, her voice unsteady. I told her I was coming home and hung up, then remembered that home still meant my house, which she clearly still thought of as hers, too. Monica gave me a quick hug at the doorway and stepped out so I could face what came next alone. I sat in my office reading furious emails from relatives I'd informed. My father was livid. My sister sent scorched lines. About 20 minutes later, Alina rushed in and shut the door. I'd never seen her so undone. "Ethan, she started. "I'm not interested," I said. She tried again. "But..." "Not interested," I repeated. "You don't even want..." "No," I said. "I don't want to hear anything from you. You lied to me for 9 years. Neither child is mine, and you talked me into a vasectomy while you stayed on the pill so you could keep up with Daddy Paul." Her eyes went wide. She hadn't expected me to say the quiet part out loud. "So no, Alina," I went on. "I don't care what you feel like saying. My lawyer's contact is in the packet you were served. Anything important goes through her." "What about the kids?" she asked. "What kids?" I said. "I don't have children, and if it were up to you, I never would." "I could ask you why," I added, "but I'm done hearing lies. I'm not interested in your reasons or spin. I want this finished so I can pick up the pieces and move forward." I called to the au pair. I knew she could hear from the hall. "You're fired," I said when she stepped in. "Effective immediately. Pack and go." "What? Why?" she asked. "Because you covered for her," I said, pointing at Alina. "You knew she was sleeping with her boss. Maybe you didn't know the kids weren't mine, but you sure knew the rest. I have video of you talking to Paul about them." "Ethan," Alina cut in. "You can't fire her. I pay her wages." The au pair looked at Alina with gratitude, as if she'd been thrown a rope. "Well," I said, "I've already told the agency you were involved in the affair, and that I won't pursue action if they remove you from their roster. If Alina wants to keep you personally, she can pay you, and handle taxes, vacation, pension, sick time, and insurance herself." The color drained from the au pair's face. Losing the agency made future placements almost impossible. She hurried out without another word. "Did you have to do that?" Alina said. She didn't just... "You're talking again," I cut in. "I told you I'm not listening. What I do want is for you to pack, take your kids, and get out of my house." "This is my house too," she protested. "Not according to the deed," I said. "It's in my name. Until a court says different, leave." She flinched at the volume in my voice. Leo stepped in to say Mara had fallen. Alina, shocked and near tears, grabbed their daughter and disappeared down the hall. I closed the office door and stayed put while she gathered belongings. A little while later, she came back holding Mara. "Are you going to say goodbye to—" "Don't say it," I snapped. "She isn't my daughter. He isn't my son. Take them to Daddy Paul and let him handle his kids. They're nothing to me." "Ethan, out," I said. When the door finally shut behind them, I broke, and a minute later, Monica slipped in because she'd waited nearby in case I did. She held on while I cried. Her calm felt like the first steady ground in days. We heard the car pull away. My phone buzzed nonstop. I ignored it and told Monica that if I could vanish from my own life, I would. She, ever firm, reminded me we still had steps to complete the HR case, the money shields, all of it. A few hours later, an email landed. Alina had requested a restraining order, claiming emotional harm, barring me from my own house until a hearing. Dana moved fast, pointing out that I was the one who installed cameras and uncovered fraud. The judge quashed the order quickly. Alina moved in with her parents. Paul lost his job when the company grasped how blatantly he'd shattered their policy while fathering 2 children with a subordinate. Lawsuits shot in all directions. In the end, Paul's employer settled quietly with me, and Paul himself paid on an alienation claim under state law money. I used to backfill the retirement penalty and firm loan. I was numb to most of it. The true wound was losing Leo and Mara, whom I still loved, but refused to see because I couldn't stand the pain. Maybe that made me a coward, but every time I pictured them, I saw Paul's face. Alina tried to use the kids to pull me back, begging me to stay in their lives. I wasn't ready. Weeks became a month. I sold the house at a loss and left, unable to keep living where betrayal had rehearsed and performed. I slept in Monica's spare room for a while. At work, we stayed professional. But outside the office, she checked on me constantly, with a care that had nothing to do with titles. The day the divorce finalized, the decree came in a thin envelope. I opened it, read the stamp that said it was over, and felt relief tangled with grief. The phone rang. Monica's voice said, "Paul Barrett is dead. His wife found him with Alina again and shot him." I stared at the handset. Dark irony settled. Paul would never raise the children he made behind my back. I didn't know whether to call that justice or just another tragedy, but I won't lie and say I felt pity. "Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy," I muttered, and Monica didn't scold me. She stepped into my office with an envelope final settlement from Paul's side, enough to close my loan and cut me free of that last chain. I leaned back, unsure what to feel. Marriage gone, fatherhood story shattered, the other man dead, and my finances finally clean in a twist I wouldn't have believed a year ago. Monica shut the door, crossed the carpet, and kissed me. Steady, certain, with no hesitation, and my heart pounded for a new reason. She smiled at my stunned face and said softly that she'd looked out for me for 9 years, that I was the most decent man she knew, that I never crossed a line even when I was broken, and that if I let her, she'd show me not every woman lies, and not every story ends in ruins. Memories flooded the quiet competence, the fierce protection, the way she fought for me when the truth came out, and I realized I'd been blind, too busy trying to save a ship that had a hole in it to see the lifeboat holding steady beside me. I remembered a urologist once telling me vasectomy reversals work more often than men think, and a small spark lit in me. The idea that fatherhood wasn't a door I'd lost forever. Still shaking from the kiss, I heard myself ask how many kids she thought we should have, and we both laughed at the rawness in my voice. "At least 2, she said, eyes warm. "But let's just see where this road goes." Right then, I understood that my world had flipped, and somehow, a new chapter had opened. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel trapped. I had closure in court, in my chest, and in my head. A part of me will always ache for the 2 children I believed were mine. Another part accepts that I can rebuild with someone who proved loyalty the whole way through. I nodded, and Monica kissed me again. That's where the old life ended and a new one began, without illusions, without deceit, and with a freedom bought at the price of heartbreak. Maybe that price was fair after all.